Alright, so as we saw with 18A, content familiarity is very subjective, and there's not always going to be a clear-cut answer to whether it's very familiar, semi-familiar, mostly unfamiliar. You'll need to use your own judgment based on your knowledge of the target audience and do your best with it. If the book is not illustrated and you don't speak the language, then really you won't be able to judge at all, and so you can always fall back on unknown, unable to evaluate. And if you do have, let's say you're very torn between very familiar, semi-familiar, or whatever, you do have this optional space on 18B to add comments, I think a pet in a jet is a very foreign concept, but they are familiar with airplanes that fly overhead, and they are familiar with rabbits, so it's not completely foreign. Or whatever, if you want to give an extra explanation, you have that option if you are feeling uncomfortable with your own judgment. But when it comes down to it, it's still very subjective, and you just do the best you can. For number 19A, we're going to flag potentially sensitive content. And for these we will rely mostly on illustrations, but then again, if you do speak the language and see things in the text that are not depicted in the illustrations in addition, you can also flag those as well. Again, we are not saying necessarily that any of these make the book unsuitable for the children. That is a very subjective judgment as well, and it differs a lot. What is appropriate or not differs a lot from one culture to the next, and even from one subculture to the next. So we just want to flag some things for further review if they are contained in the content of the book. The end users can then go back and judge for themselves whether they think that's handled in an culturally appropriate way or not. Even something like nudity, certain depictions may be culturally appropriate in some groups and not in others. So that's something that we want to leave up the ultimate judgment to the end user, but we do just want to flag it if we do see any of these things. And you have on your help button or on your guide definitions of exactly what any of these things are meant for. Any known cultural taboos. You may not know every cultural taboo if it's not your own culture, but if there's very obvious ones, for example, if it's a language group dominated by Muslims and they show people consuming alcohol and eating pork, that's a pretty well-known one. If you are shocked by any of the attire that the characters in the book are wearing, and you think, oh my goodness, if my daughter wore that, I would not let her out of the house, then that might be a clue that it might be culturally inappropriate, at least in your culture, if you are the same group as the target audience. So you can certainly flag any of those. Again, you may not see anything. You can just click this one, or if it's not illustrated and you don't read the language, then obviously you will have to choose unknown or unable to evaluate. If you do see anything and you want to give us further comment, further explanation on it, just to clarify, you have that space and you can type in those comments, and feel free to do that, but it's not obligatory either. Then we'll come down to question 20 here very quickly before we get into the last few questions. Do the illustrations portray any humans or anthropomorphized animals or objects, which means animal characters given human traits? And just to clarify what that would look like, for example, we have this little story, which is about a frog, and here the frogs are talking with his friend. They're chatting. He wants to go to town. He's telling his friend how he's going to get to town. He's doing all these things, and he finally goes to town, and he meets up with another frog. You can see this is a classic example of an animal that has been given human characteristics, because as we know, frogs don't really wear pants and hat and shoes, but he does here, and they're talking. So this is what we are referring to, where the animals are given human traits, such as talking and wearing clothes or acting as they would humans. And in this case, you will consider animals as humans for the remaining questions.